Hello, welcome back to the FPS porn tutorial series. In this video we're going to be handling picking up and dropping weapons and building out a little more functionality with our pawn. First of all, it was drawn to my attention in my last video that we're shooting here and our ammo is going down. If we switch to the Glock and then back to the AK, you can see that our magazine is back to full. And this is not good. We want to be able to preserve the ammo that's in the clip between our weapon switching. So you can see here, if I drop the bullets in the Glock here, it goes back to its full capacity, and this isn't good. So we're going to be building this out and fixing up the way that our weapons work a bit. And the way that we're going to do this is with a little file. If we right-click and go to Blueprints, at the bottom there's Structure, and a structure is basically just a collection of variables within the one construct. For example, a vector is a struct with 3 variables in it, 3 float variables. And ours is going to contain all of the data for our guns. So we're going to call it gun data, and then we'll open it up and we'll start adding variables here. We're going to need 5 variables. First of all, we want a class. So we'll type in weapon base BP. We need to make it a class reference, not an object reference, because we'll be manipulating the class of the weapon base. And we'll go and call this just class. Then we want our integers. So we want 2 integers. This will be our ammo count and our max ammo. And then we want 2 floats for the other 2 variables that we contain in our weapons. This will be our reload time and our bullet spread. So with those all set, let's just hit save and we're ready to go forward. The next thing that we'll do is just open up our weapon base blueprint. I've gone and added a few more custom events here that we'll be using going forward. For example, in a future video, we'll be making an automatic weapon, converting the AK to full auto, and also these 2 events for equipping and unequipping the guns. So to make a custom event, just right click, type in custom event, and you'll see this here, add event, and then just type in these names. I've got fire, stop firing, reload, equip, and then unequip. So once those are done, we're ready to move forward. Although, let's hit our primary weapon here and reset our skeletal mesh back to none. We don't want a weapon in our weapon base anymore. So we'll close that, and we're ready to move on. So let's go to our first-person player pawn here. And over on the left in our gun child class, let's just set this back to our default weapon base. We don't want to have a weapon set as our default here. So when we press play, we want no weapon in the hands of our player. So that should all be working fine. The next thing to do is to create 2 more variables. This will be our, we'll call it primary weapon. And we'll make this a gun data structure. And then make another variable. This will be our secondary weapon. So it's a little bit similar to what we did in a previous video with our variables as the gun, but instead of assigning that variable at runtime and using just object references to our weapons, these are struct values. And we hit compile. You can see here that we've got access to all of these variables inside our structure, including the class and all that kind of thing, but we're not going to set any of these, although we'll set them by default to the weapon base. Okay, so with that done, we can start changing, for example, the way that we switch weapons here. So instead of just, I might just move this out to get a bit more space. So instead of just checking for whether we're reloading, we also want to make sure that our child class is actually, a weapon, so that nothing happens if we're trying to switch to the same weapon that we're carrying. So let's just drag in our primary weapon, just with a get, a control drag, and our secondary weapon, and we'll right click and split this struct pin so we can see all of these variables in our, in our variable here. Then let's grab ourselves, we'll come out of this primary weapon class for 1. We want exclamation mark equal. We want a not equal. We want to make sure that it is not equal to the weapon base. We want to know that we have the weapon there before we go switching to it. And we'll duplicate this little Boolean value here and do the same for the secondary weapon. Just line these up all right. And then out of the Boolean results here, let's get an OR Boolean. So if the primary weapon or the weapon base here are just our base weapon base, then we won't be able to switch. We need to know that they actually have a weapon in them. So we'll put this up here, make a little room. There we go. And I'm going to duplicate these 2 branches here so that we can use the result of our OR as the condition for our key presses. And then if this is true, if the result is true, then we'll go into our reloading. that takes care of when we switch weapons, just to make sure that we actually have one to switch to and we're not just using the base weapon. From here though, we're going to have to make some changes to the way that we switch our weapons. So let's just move these little nodes out of the way for a little bit, and we're going to have them selected just like this. Right click, collapse to function. And we're going to call this our weapon switch function. And we'll drag this back over to our graph and hook up the result of these sets into our weapon switch, then double click it, and we can start building out some functionality here. So we've got our our basic switch on int here. That's not going to change, although we'll disconnect these set child actor class variables, because we're going to need to unequip the weapon that we're holding before we go and switch. So to do that, we need to have something in our weapons, an unequip event. So let's go back to our content browser and open up our AK to start with. And so nothing's changed here since our last video, but let's right click and get our unequip event, our event unequip, and then get our player character, because we're going to need to be casting to our pawn. And then, well, we'll convert this into a pure cast, and then get our primary weapon. So we'll set our primary weapon this way. And then just right click this, split our structure pin, because we need to get all of our variables here. So let's just get our ammo count. We'll get our max ammo. Where are we? Get max ammo. Get our reload time. And get our bullet spread. These are all of the basic variables of our weapons. And hook them up into our set node here. I'll just connect this just for convenience. And then just connect these into their proper spot. Reload time and bullet spread. And the primary weapon class is going to be our AK_weapon. So we'll compile that. And that should be all that we need to do here for now. So let's head back to our FPS pawn. And then call our unequip. So let's just right click. Well, actually, we'll get our gun and then get our child actor. Cast to our weapon base. There we go. Convert this to a pure cast. All right, we'll just line things up, because then we can get our unequip event. And then we'll just connect one of these up to each of our 0 and our 1 results. Okay, so far so good. And then we can connect up our set child actor class just like this, making sure, of course, that we set up the target back to our cast here so that everything lines up and everything's connected. Okay, so from our set child actor class here, well, we need to set the right data for the right class. So let's just grab our primary weapon and our secondary weapon once more, split these struct pins, and then start connecting things up. So the top row here with our weapon equip set at 0, that's going to be our AK, that'll be our primary weapon. So we'll drag our primary weapon class into the in class of our set child actor, and we'll do the same for our secondary weapon just while we're here. Following that, we have our cast here to our weapon base. I'll just move this up. We need to grab all of the, actually I'll just duplicate these, otherwise we'll have lines all over the screen. So duplicate these, and then we're going to get all of the variables from our weapon. So we need to set them. We'll set our ammo, set ammo counts, set our max ammo, set our reload time, and set our bullet spread. Okay, and with that done, we'll hook all these guys up. I've done this in a way that's... I'll stack them all up here just so it's a bit easier to see on one screen. Oh, although we have to also check that we aren't holding our basic weapon-based blueprint, similar to the way we did at the front here. So we'll just I'll grab this and this, just copy, and then paste them over here in our function, because we're going to be changing the visibility of the arms based on what weapon we're holding. So if we've got just the basic weapon base, then we don't want the arms to show up just holding an imaginary gun. So let's just connect this not equal to this branch, and then from the false, so in other words, if we... No, wait, we want an equal. So let's just come out of our primary here into an equal class. This will be our weapon base BP. Plug this into the condition. There we go. And now from our false, so that's the false of our branch here, we'll connect up all of these variables in a string, just like that. So far so good. And if we are carrying the weapon base, we want to make sure that our arms don't show up. So we'll get a set visibility node for our mesh 1p, and that will hide our arms when we're not carrying an actual gun. And then do the opposite when we are carrying a gun. So we'll just duplicate this set visibility node and hook it up, drag it over here from our bullet spread variable, just like that. And then from here, we can come out of our weapon base into our equip event here in our weapon, just in case we want to do anything when we equip the gun. For example, play an animation or something like that. So with that all finished and looking very, very messy, we can go ahead and tidy all of this up. So let's just grab all of our variables here. We'll grab this branch. We'll grab our set child actor and the gun variable here. I think that's all we'll grab. Let's just have that all selected, then right click and collapse this to a macro. Oh, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself there. We don't need to collapse it to a macro yet. We want to hook up all of our variables first out of our class. Let's just connect all of these into our variables from our primary weapon struct here, and then we'll grab all of our variables. Just like that, we'll grab all of this, except the primary weapon. We're not going to need that in our macro. So grab all of this, right click, collapse to macro. And this macro will be called set weapon vars. Alright, so that gets us going. Now let's just open up our macro here and we can organize this in a way that makes a bit more sense. So over here on the right, you see all of our inputs and outputs as we collapsed the macro just now. We want to move the execution up to the top. So it's a bit more like a proper node. We'll leave all of these here as is, although, yeah, we can just use this in class instead of our A. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that A and then move our class up to the top as well so it matches our struct. There we go. As for our output, we've got true and false values, so let's see which one's which. So then to, we're going to rename this to true, and the then we'll rename to false. There we go, and I'll just move these up to the top as well. As weapon-based BP, as our gun. Yep, that's all good, although we might not need the gun. We'll revisit this, because we have to do the same thing for our handgun, our Glock. As you can see, this A has turned red, so we can just disconnect that and it will vanish. We're not going to need that anymore. And we'll even go back into our vars here. We'll disconnect these two outputs, the weapon base and the gun, and just our vars here from our output chain. So back in our weapon switch, you can see that these have now turned red. We'll just get rid of those. And we need a child actor class here for our secondary weapon. That's okay, we'll just delete that and just duplicate our set weapon vars macro. So we'll hook up our unequip for our secondary weapon and then plug in all of these into the macro. There we go. This is very good for convenience. You know, keeps all of our little lines there in check, as it were. So we need something here to plug into equip. We'll just use our weapon base cast, just like that. And then where are we? What have we got left to do? So we need to set the visibility to false of our mesh 1p. We need to do this for both. So we'll set this one to true. This one will be our false. So our true here is going to go to the false, and the false here is going to go to the true. And that should be it. That should set us up. Make some nice geometry with the execution lines. And we hit compile. That should fix itself, that little red dot on the equip. And this should be our weapon switching adjusted and finished for our new system. So let's hit save on that and go back to our first person pawn here. We could probably test it out now. So just make sure everything's saved, hit play, and we've got nothing. Well, let's investigate this. So actually, let's make a couple of keyboard events here. I'll just use the 3 and the 4 key. This is just for testing. We'll just do this to make sure that everything's going fine. And let's get a set for each of our weapons here. Split these struct pins. There we go. And we'll set our 3 to the AK. We'll set our 4 to the Glock. There we go. And just set up our data here. So the AK had 30 ammo, 30 max ammo. Reload time of 2. I think it was, yeah, just 2. Might have been 2.5. We'll go with 2. And a bullet spread of 175. Our Glock, 11, 11. Reload time of 2. And bullet spread of 175. So these aren't the values that are directly out of our weapon, but these will do for, just for testing. And furthermore, let's open up our Glock. There it is, our Glock weapon. We need to do the same thing that we did with our AK weapon here. I'm just going to grab all of this, copy it, and just paste it into the graph here for our Glock. And also change our primary weapon to the Glock weapon. File that, save it, save that in our AK as well. File this, save it in our FPS pawn. And when we hit play and then hit 3 and 4, we'll set our weapons. And okay, so we're not getting our AK. We're not getting our AK pawn. AK weapon, rather. Why is that? Oh, you know what I bet it is? Yeah, we're setting the primary weapon in the Glock and not the secondary. Alright, so let's set our secondary weapon with the Glock. So we split this pin, we can delete this node. There we go. Our secondary weapon needs to be the Glock. And then plug in all of our variables here. Just like that. So compile, save, hit play. So we don't see anything when we spawn in because 1 and 2 haven't been assigned yet. But if we hit 3 and 4, or then vice versa, we set data into our primary and our secondary weapon and our pawn. And then 1 is our AK. And 2 is our Glock. So there's the system working as normal. And in fact, let's just have a look here. So I hit 3, but not 4. So when I go to 2, it disappears and I can't shoot or reload or anything. But then if I hit 4 and then 2, the Glock comes back. And our reloading's working fine. Reload. So let's fire out some bullets. I'm going to switch gun, fire out some more bullets, switch back, and now you can see that our magazine is preserving the bullets that we had in the clip. So there's no more of that full magazine when we switch weapons. So that addresses the initial thing, the preserving bullets between weapon swaps. Although our Glock, well, yeah, like these are going to cause problems because these variables are just numbers that we put in. So we can get rid of all of this. Although, no, actually, I'll leave it because we'll just drop our reload here to 1.5. I'll leave them there because we might need them for testing a little bit going forward. One thing to do though is to right-click, get our begin play node, begin play, and we want to set our mesh 1p, that's our arms, to be invisible when the game starts. So we're going to set visibility. Make sure that it's set to no. And there we go. So now when we hit play, we got no arms. And you can't see it, but I'm hitting 1 and 2, and nothing's happening. If I hit 4, nothing will happen on its own because it's not going to automatically switch yet. But then if I hit 1, still nothing. If I hit 2, up comes my Glock. And then I can select my primary slot, and there'll be no weapon there. And I can go back to my Glock. Just like that. And then when I hit 3, it'll give me my AK. And I got the gunfire going on like that. So that's all working perfectly as intended. The next thing to do is to make our weapon pickups. So I'm just going to save all there. And we're going to come over here. I'm going to right click. Let's make ourselves a new blueprint class. It'll be an actor. We'll call it pickup underscore AK. Hit enter. And I suppose I should tell you guys now that I've gone and uploaded 2 more models for you guys to play with. I'll leave a link to them down in the description along with the regular assets download for anyone that hasn't yet picked them up. I've gone and added 2 static meshes for you guys, one for the AK and one for the Glock. You could get away with using the rigged versions, although I wanted to make some custom collision for these guys. So we open up, for example, the Glock. It's just a static mesh, and then where's our visualization? We go to simple. I've just added 2 simple box collisions there for the Glock. And you can do that just by going to collision, then add box collision, and then you can manipulate it as you would any other object in the world. And similarly for the AK, we display simple collision. I've just added just 2 simple boxes here, although they're a bit out of line. I'm just going to size them back in. In fact, we could get away with making them a little thinner. Perhaps not too thin. There we go. Same with the one for the magazine. There we are. So yeah, I'm going to add these 2 models down in the description below, and you can pick them up to download and follow along if you like. So let's go back to our blueprints here. Where's our pickup? Ah, there it is. So let's open up our gun pickup. I'm just going to put it up here. And let's add a component. We're going to add our static mesh first. Static mesh, make sure it's our AK underscore mesh. Might just make that a little bit more central. Although, we'll just drag it onto our scene root, actually. And then let's add a component here. I'm going to add a sphere. Simple sphere collision. And then make our sphere radius a little bigger, and I'm going to position that sort of centrally around our AK. Okay, so that's our asset pretty much done. Oh, got my tab there. Let's compile. We'll go to our event graph and we can start building this out. So we're not going to need our, we won't need that begin overlap or that event tick. We will have to grab the sphere, scroll down here on the right, and you'll find all of these events here that we can call on. What we want is on component begin overlap, and then we get this on component begin overlap brackets sphere. That's the one we want. And our begin play. So at begin play, we want to set our collision enabled on the sphere to no collision. then delay, get ourselves a delay for 0.5, and then duplicate this set collision. Where are we? There we go, duplicated. Plug it back into the sphere, and this will be set to query only, no physics collision. So we'll compile that, and we also need to make sure that this does have collision. We want it to generate overlap events and overlap all dynamic. That's straightforward, but our static mesh here, we don't need overlap events, and instead of our block all dynamic, let's go to custom. We want it to block everything except our pawn. So where it says here, pawn, the little checkbox, click that, and now our pawn won't interact with the weapon on the ground, but it will block everything else. This is so that when we throw the gun from the player, it's not going to immediately register back and cause problems there, basically make the engine crash. Instead, it's just going to wait for a half second before re-enabling its own collision. Hope that makes sense for you guys. So then let's, so we'll handle the overlap now. We'll handle the actual weapon pickup. So from other actor, well actually we need to just cast to our FPS pawn. Plug this into our other actor. I'll convert this to a pure cast, just for efficiency. And then get a branch. We need a branch, make sure that we succeed in colliding with the player. Hook this up to our overlap. And if we do, we need to make sure that we don't already have the weapon that we're trying to pick up. So as FPS pawn, let's get our primary weapon, because it's the AK pickup. There we go, we'll split the structure pin, and then make sure that we're not carrying the weapon, or rather that we are carrying the weapon base. Because if we're already carrying the AK, we don't want to swap to a weapon we already have. So we'll get our weapon base underscore BP, get ourselves another branch, use our equals as the condition. We'll hook this up to true. And then we want to set our primary weapon. So out of our cast again, let's get a set primary weapon. Split the structure. And we need to use our actual AK stats here in the reload. So that's 30 in the ammo count, 30 in the max ammo. The reload time is 2.0. And the bullet spread is 175. All right, and we just plug that into true. And then once we've picked up, we also have to set the class to AK. And once we've done that, once we've set our weapon, once we picked it up, we just want to destroy our pickup. We get a destroy actor. And we're done. So that's the basic logic for our weapon pickups. So we need to compile that and save it, and then duplicate this with Control W. This will be our pickup underscore Glock. And then we'll just change some settings here so that we're not, picking up an AK. So that's the Glock mesh. And instead of our primary weapon, we want to get our secondary weapon. I just typed in primary. What do I do that? Secondary weapon, and a set secondary weapon. Remember to split them both. And we'll make the check here with our secondary weapon. Delete our primary weapon nodes. We don't need them anymore. And then out of the true, set our Glock class and put some stats in. So that's 11 in the ammo count and the max ammo. The reload time will be, I think it is 1.5. And the bullet spread, same as the AK at 175. So the only thing here that sets this part without quite as much functionality as, say, Counter-Strike, is that we'll need to store the remaining ammo in the clip in the weapon that we drop out of the player. I might cover that in a future video for the sake of time here, and so that this video doesn't go on for an hour. We'll just do this in quite a simple way, but we'll get to that. Because now we're going back to the first-person player pawn, and we're going to build out the functionality that will allow us to pick up the weapon once it's dropped. I went ahead and used the V key. So we'll type in V key, and we'll get this keyboard event. And then we use the same switch on integer that we used in our function here. So I'll just copy that, head back to our event graph, paste it in here. So when we press V, we're going to throw our weapon away. And the way that we do that, let's grab our primary weapon as a get, and our secondary weapon as a get. And, well, we'll build out just the primary weapon for a start. So we'll come out of here into an equals. That's not right, we need to split this first. I just don't want the class. Equal class, we'll get a branch and plug this in. The class that we want is the AK. So if we're holding the AK, we'll be able to move forward, and that's where we'll go true. And out of our true, we want to spawn our actor. Spawn actor from class. Oh, and I should have mentioned in our pickups, we need to go to our static mesh, simulate physics. Make sure that we have physics enabled so that they do travel through the air, and that we can actually apply physics to the object. So check the simulate physics box in both of your pickup blueprints, and make sure to compile and save as well. compile and save. All right, that makes sure that we can, they will interact with physics. So let's right-click this spawn transform here to split this pin into our location, rotation, and scale. And make sure that the class is our AK underscore pickup. Actually, no, it's the other way around. It's the pickup underscore AK. There we go. And we want to get a position in the scene in order to throw our AK from. So let's go back to our viewport. Up here in the add component, let's add ourselves a scene component. A scene component is just a point in space that we can reference to and use for different things. Basically for like getting locations and that kind of stuff. And we'll name this our throw point. There we go. Compile that. Head back to our script here. We'll grab our throw point. And from our throw point, we can get, for example, get our world transform, split this pin, and we'll get similarly the same location, rotation, and scale info as we have in our spawn actor node. But we're not going to use just the raw transform structure. We're instead going to get some random rotation when it throws. But either way, we'll plug in our transform location and our transform scale. Then right-click. Let's get a float. We want a random float. Get a random float. Why is that not working? Random float. There's no get. I remember. Random float in range. And that range is going to be minus 180 in the minimum to positive 180 in the maximum. And then we're going to make a rotator out of that. Make rotator and just plug this random float into all three of these endpoints here. Then plug that into our rotation and we're good to keep going. So from here, we want to add an impulse to our spawned actor. We'll just get the impulse node. We'll delete this 1p here because we want the return value of our spawn actor as the target. It'll use the static mesh, which is handy because our static mesh is the root, so it's going to carry the sphere with it because the sphere is a child of our mesh. Pretty straightforward hierarchical sort of priority there. And our impulse is going to be the forward vector of our throw point. So out of our throw point, let's get the forward vector and then add, we'll actually multiply. We'll multiply our forward vector by, we'll say 500, and then plug that into our impulse. This is a value that you can adjust. This is the strength of the throw. So you can probably add functionality here for like if you want to just simply drop it on the ground or, you know, whip it way out like a football. It's up to you entirely. I'm going to check this velocity change here, and then let's reset our primary weapon. So hold an Alt and click to get our primary weapon back, split the structure, and make it a weapon base, and all the stats will be left at 0. With that done, we need to grab our gun, set our child actor class. There we go. We'll set our child actor class to the weapon base, hook this up, and then set the visibility of our arms back to invisible. So if you're following along, what we've just been doing is dropping the weapon. We're basically undoing all of those things that we did in the set variable. So in the set, you know, weapon switching in the set weapon variables section, where when we pick up the weapon, our visibility hits true, and then when we throw it away, our visibility is back to being false. So it's all pretty straightforward. And now we're going to just duplicate a lot of this stuff for our Glock. So I'm going to duplicate this branch and this condition here. What else do we want to duplicate? All of this. Yep. So we'll duplicate all of these guys and start changing up some of these settings. So we want to get our secondary weapon here. Hold an Alt and click, not Alt, Control. We want to get, and then we'll split that. Just grab the class and plug it in here, and change our weapon here to the Glock. Glock underscore weapon. Hook up our, whoop, grab the wrong thing. Hook up our branch. And there we go. All right, so far so good. And then we plug in all of these same settings here from our throw point. Also change our pickup. We want the pickup Glock. Plug in our impulse. We want to set our secondary weapon. So that's an Alt drag. Split that. There we go. Make sure it's all hooked up. And the class we want to set is the weapon base. But instead of the primary weapon, as we did before, we want the secondary weapon because it's our Glock. Then we hook up our gun, to our set child actor class, and then we can just plug in this set child actor to our visibility. Okay, so that's the basic functionality for throwing around. Let's compile that. We'll save it. I missed something. Oh yes, the return node from our pickup AK object. Oh, fair enough. All right, so we'll drag our return value there. I guess it was still looking for the AK static mesh. That's alright. Not a big deal. Compile. Alright, let's see how it works. So obviously nothing's going to happen when I hit V because there's no weapons equipped, but if we hit 3 and 4, we'll get our AK and Glock. So let's see what happens when I throw the AK. Alright, very nice. And now there's no AK in my first slot. I've still got the Glock, but when I hit 1, I've got no AK. And let's throw the Glock away. There we go. And they're going to have a random rotation every single time that I throw them. And when I walk over, I can pick them up again. Let's walk over the AK, pick it up, and I can throw it. Pick up the Glock, and I can use that as well. Alright, so we're all set here. Let's do a little bit of a recap, because I know that I covered quite a lot here. We can delete this 3 and 4, we don't need that anymore. File that, save. But if we come back to the world here, let's drop our pickups into the world. I'm going to give them a little bit of height so that they sort of tumble around on the ground. Here we go, when we hit play, they'll drop. Oh, look at that. 1 in a million drop that. Alright, there we go. Alright, back to our blueprints. I'll close some of these tabs, might give me a bit more frames per second. My old PC, it's showing its age. Okay, so when we're changing our weapons, we look for our primary, secondary weapon class, and if they're not equal to the weapon base, then we can select. But if they are, then we can't. This is how we tell the difference between whether our primary or our secondary is being occupied by a weapon. We're going to use this weapon-based blueprint, which is the default set in our gun child class here, before going into or setting our integer, and then going into our weapon switch function, which will switch on that integer, unequip the weapon that we were holding, and then set the weapon slot with our ammo and with our updated variables, which we're getting from our weapon. So open up the AK here. You can see we're setting our data for our weapon here from the base variables of our blueprint. And this is how we keep up with like the ammo count in the magazine, because we're setting that in our first-person player pawn primary weapon when we unequip this gun. So when that gets unequipped, the pawn here thinks that our primary weapon, the one that we're still holding, is still carrying that same number of bullets. And then we just change the visibility of our arms based on whether or not we're holding a weapon. So that's all pretty straightforward. Where else we go? In the in the begin play, we just set our arms to invisible because we're not carrying a gun. And then when we drop a gun, we just use our throw point here to find the location we throw it from, add a bit of force to it, and then set ourselves back to our basic weapon base. So we built out some pretty cool throwing and picking up of weapons. Even played around with some new things like collapsing functions and making new macros. There might be a little bit more optimization we can do here. Maybe some of this can be turned into a macro. I might experiment with that at a later date. So where do we go from here? Well, if you guys find any more bugs, any more issues with it, then I will definitely address it, either in another video or maybe some other way. This also addresses how it was brought to my attention that when you're in the game and you've got the weapon base set as the child actor class, you would have to hit 1 or 2 in order to actually equip a gun. So now that should be addressed by just simply not having a gun when you spawn. Although if you do want to have a gun, you can just set a child actor in your gun child actor class, or even just manually set your classes over here, your primary and your secondary, if you so choose. I like this way though. I like the idea of spawning without guns and then having to go pick them up. You know, a bit like, I guess a little bit like PUBG in a way. You know, if you want to think of it like that. But anyway, guys, thanks for sticking around with me as long as this. This was the 8th part in this series. It's been a pretty big commitment of mine. I won't lie. So I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys get something out of it. If you'd like to see anything else, any other mechanics, that kind of thing, to do with a first-person sort of gameplay system like this, then please don't hesitate to drop a comment. Join my Discord. There's a link in the description of every video. But other than that, guys, I think we're done. So I'll catch you next time. See ya.